picture this. You have the perfect running mate. You've got a guy who is super popular in his state, which happens to be a swing state. He's super charismatic. He fits the demographic that you need because that matters for some reason. And yet you don't pick him. Why? Because he's Jewish, and you're the party that preaches tolerance for all, and we are not racist. Holy cow, Kamala's pick could not have been worse. My name is Joe Bob. I have some thoughts, and they are as follows. Republicans everywhere are celebrating the fact that Josh Shapiro, the super popular, super charismatic, very well-spoken, in effect moderate governor of Pennsylvania, was not chosen as Kamala Harris's running mate. Every single person I talked to in conservative politics this morning was like, what in the freaking world are these people thinking? Josh Shapiro is the clear and obvious choice for vice president. Not to mention, he wanted to be the vice presidential pick for Kamala Harris's presidential ticket for 2024. There's a lot of other Democrats that didn't want to be that pick. Gretchen Whitmer out of Michigan, Gavin Newsom out of California did not want to be on the losing ticket with Kamala Harris. And yet, a popular governor in a swing state that Democrats need to win, who's a charismatic dude who a lot of people liked and is pretty moderate when it comes to policy stuff. Now, we're not going to go with him. We're going to go with some fat old dude who is a crazy progressive socialist, but we'll get to Tampon Tim in just a little bit. But I want to talk about this Josh Shapiro pick. Think about it. Josh Shapiro, in 2022, ran during the same election as John Fetterman. Both Democrats, both running for statewide elected offices. John Fetterman won by about 5 points, give or take, right? 5 points. Against Dr. Oz. Josh Shapiro running in the same race in a statewide ticket with the same D next to his name, won by 15 points in Pennsylvania. Now, just goes without saying, Pennsylvania is a swing state. And the differentiating between Fetterman running for Senate and Shapiro running for governor just goes to show you how good of a candidate this guy is. I sound like I'm repeating myself. He's well-spoken. He's articulate, which basically means well-spoken. He's popular. He's moderate. He's in a swing state. All of the earmarks that you need to have in your vice presidential pick, if you think vice presidential picks matter at all. But if you think they matter at all, he is the guy. And yet, the Kamala Harris team didn't pick him. Why? Well, because he's Jewish. And if I don't know. I hate hyperbole and I hate using the term anti-Semite. You know, I hate throwing around hyperbolic terms, okay? But the Democrat Party is so anti-Semitic, they couldn't risk having the clear and obvious best pick for vice president be on the ticket with Kamala Harris. Why? Because they also have to win Michigan. And in order to win Michigan, you have to win Dearborn, a heavily Muslim-populated area. And because Josh Shapiro is Jewish, they decided that it wasn't worth the risk, again, to pick the best candidate they could have picked in this race that was willing to run with Kamala Harris because they needed to win Dearborn, Michigan. And they go around... Democrats in the left and progressives go around calling everybody else racist. I don't get it. Literally, the guy's race is the reason he is not on this ticket. Josh Shapiro's. Unbelievable. There's no situation in which Tim Walz, who we'll talk about in just a second, Tampon Tim, as he's being called affectionately on the internet and by me, Even though I sometimes I stay away from the name calling, but this one is super fitting. Tampon Tim should be his name. Donald Trump should call him Tampon Tim and California Kamala. Anyways, where was I? Instead they're going to go with Tim Walz, the super lefty progressive socialist from Minnesota. It's unbelievably stupid how bad this pick was. And also, like I mentioned earlier, every single Republican commentator, guy in politics that I talked to was nervous over the weekend. Of like, not nervous necessarily, but like, look, this race becomes so much tighter if it is Josh Shapiro running on the ticket with Kamala Harris. Because he's, again, a moderate from a swing state and a popular governor who is very, very, very well-spoken. There's a lot of clips of him speaking, and he sounds exactly like Barack Obama. And I don't know. People are hitting him for it. They're like, Josh Shapiro is just an Obama imitator. I'm like, okay, well, Obama's the most popular person in the Democratic Party. What? What are you gonna not imitate Obama? Like, that's stupid. But the whole thing is fascinating. There's also some reaction from people on the lefty side of the aisle that I thought was really, really interesting. Let me read this tweet. I was going to just paraphrase it, but I might as well read it for you. This is Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, who did not want to be on the ticket with Kamala Harris. And that's that weird, like, you can't run from the same state thing. But this is Gavin Newsom. Just brilliant, period. No one knows more about the job than the sitting vice president, who has served for a former two-term VP. Okay, that's an interesting, dumb... that doesn't matter at all, Gavin. Anyways, Tim Walz, Gavin says, is about doing the right thing. Whether it's free school meals or standing up to gun violence, he's never been intimidated. He's about honor and decency. That's another theme that I think is really, really... a bad thing for Democrats to run on, and is exactly the right pick in the campaign about daylight versus darkness. He's an incredible partner as a governor and will make an incredible vice president. Let's go. Signed, Gavin Newsom. I've mentioned this before. Gavin Newsom wants Kamala Harris to lose more than anybody on planet Earth. I don't care if you are the biggest. I know some of the biggest MAGA people ever. Donald Trump can do no wrong. These people, some of them think, which is fine. I like these people, and Gavin Newsom wants Donald Trump to win more than they do. The Trumpiest of Trumpy people, Gavin Newsom wants Kamala Harris to lose, and it should be obvious. Gavin's entire angle is running for president in 2028. He wanted Donald Trump to win in 2020. So he can run in 2024 as a sitting governor of the most populous U.S. state. But unfortunately for Gavin, Joe Biden ended up winning, and Gavin had to pretend to be excited. So the reason Gavin and Gretchen Whitmer didn't want to run on the ticket, and the reason why Josh Shapiro wanting to run, I think, is so significant with Kamala Harris, is that both of them are angling to run in 2028. And they didn't want a loss to Donald Trump to stain that part of their candidacy. That's why Gavin Newsom and Gretchen Whitmer didn't want to run. So the fact that Josh Shapiro was even willing to consider being attached to a sinking ship as it goes down is amazing. And the fact that they didn't pick him is astonishing, because they need to win Dearborn, Michigan. Dang, man. What a wild time to be alive. And you know what's even more wild? Tampon Tim. Tampon Tim is a pretty appropriate name, I think, for the guy who is now going to be Kamala Harris's running mate. Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota. I'm going to play you a commercial that somebody clearly had ready to go before the pick was actually ever in. But this is Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota. And it kind of just displays, well, what is he about? What is Tim Walz about? He's about as progressive as you can be, bowing down entirely to the leftiest of the left in the Democrat Party, and that is not hyperbole. I've said so many times I don't like hyperbole. I think I said last week that unfortunately Republicans have called everybody to the left of Jimmy Carter a communist, And, boy who cried wolf situation. But in this particular situation, you actually have a socialist in Tim Walz. Watch this clip. This is not necessarily about his socialist policies, but it's more about him signing a bill that you're going to be like, there's no way I knew somebody actually signed that. But he did. He signed it. This is the hit commercial, and I think this type of commercial will work all across the United States of America. Watch this.
What could be weirder than signing a bill into law that requires schools to stock tampons in boys' bathrooms? Or weirder than signing legislation allowing minors to receive sex change operations? Try electing the man who signed those bills Vice President of the United States. Enter Chief Weirdo Tim Walz. As governor of Minnesota, Walz supported legislation that endangers minors, hurts women, and puts radical ideology ahead of common sense. Now Kamala wants Walz to enforce those laws on a national scale. Tim Walz, too weird, too radical.
Yeah. I think that commercial is going to play very, very, very well in normal America. Tim Walz also is being hit for another clip, which is just one of many that's going to come out, where he says, like, some man's socialism is another man's neighborliness, implying that, well, sometimes socialism is just looking out for your neighbor. Looking out to make sure your neighbor dies first of starvation and you have enough for your family. Yeah, this is real neighborly, Tim Walz. I at the risk of beating a dead horse, I cannot get over the fact that they just whiffed. And this is a part of the argument that I feel like I've been making for a very long time. I like to look at politics, especially the presidential race, as a sport. Sorry if that's like super cynical, but it is the most competitive sport on planet Earth and has a clear winner and loser, hopefully. And if you look at it as a sport, in the same way that you look at, I don't know, your preferred NFL team, it would be dumb if your team, let's just say you like, I don't know, the Patriots, you're a big Patriots fan. It would be stupid of you to not acknowledge that Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs are very, very good. It would be stupid of you to ignore all of the strengths that their team has and just say, nah, Patrick Mahomes sucks. No, he doesn't. The Chiefs don't suck. That doesn't mean you want the Chiefs to win. That just means you're looking at it as an objective observer who enjoys the sport of football, who doesn't do themselves any service by ignoring the talent on the opposing team. That is the way that I look at politics. There's no need for us as conservatives or Republicans, whatever you want to call us, to say, they're just so dumb, which they are. But if they made the right pick, it wouldn't have been, this show today wouldn't have been laughing at the Kamala Harris campaign. If they had made the right pick in Josh Shapiro, I would have said, that's a good pick. That's a good choice for her running mate. And how do Republicans/conservatives respond accordingly? There's a lot of dirt that came out over the weekend. Nobody's quite sure who put it out on Shapiro. Some payoff for some scandal, along with a couple other things that I kind of thought weren't actually going to derail him. If that wasn't the thing. Those things that came out at the weekend, those were not the thing that got Josh Shapiro to not get the nomination for vice president from Kamala Harris, who officially, I think officially has the nomination now, which, we can talk about the whole democracy and protecting democracy by not allowing anyone to vote and only putting a candidate through who was polling in the single digits when she tried to run in 2020. But all of that being said, politics is a sport. Presidential politics is a very competitive sport, obviously. And if your opponent makes good moves, it doesn't do you any good to ignore those good moves. But in this particular case, they made one of the worst moves I think they could possibly make. Kamala Harris was ranked as the most liberal senator in the U.S. Senate when she was a senator. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Kamala Harris was from California. She was never going to lose her seat, and so she never had any need to disavow even the craziest of stuff. Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are obviously, I think ideologically, they probably believe more progressive lefty things than Kamala Harris. But Kamala Harris didn't have to ever say, no, that's too far. Because she was so much more secure in her seat in California as a senator than Warren and Bernie Sanders. And I understand they're very secure in those seats too. But at the end of the day, that's why Kamala Harris was ranked as the most liberal senator. But regardless of why she was or why she was able to vote for some of the crazier stuff, she still was ranked the most liberal senator in the Senate. Now, if you're going to be the most liberal, or if you're going to be, let's just take out liberal, just on either side. If you're going to be the furthest possible on the left or on the right, what would you do naturally? Well, you would try to balance it out, which again, Josh Shapiro does for her. He's a pretty moderate governor of a very purplish swing state. But no, instead, the Kamala Harris ticket made the decision to go with an even more progressive person in Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, which goes to show you they don't know the sport that they're playing. I was trying to make the case, and I hate to keep bringing it up, but this I like talking to my lefty friends. I like talking to my Democrat friends, my Democrat strategist friends about strategy. I've often said if I ran the DNC, the Democrats would win constantly, like nonstop. Not because I want them to win because of their ideology, but because a lot of them run races poorly. Kamala Harris in 2020 ran a race poorly. And a lot of the things that I say to my more lefty friends is the internet is not real life. Social media isn't real. The reason I think Kamala Harris did not win, or didn't even get a close win. The reason I think Kamala Harris had to get out of the presidential primary before Iowa is because their team, I believe, looked at the internet and it was filled with a bunch of young people who think everybody's life is entirely about politics all the time. It just is not. It objectively is not this everyone's paying attention to politics 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It just isn't. But if you believe that, if you believe that everything is politics all the time, always, well, then you're going to have some people who look at the internet as a bigger, broader picture of the American public. And it just is not. If you ask a poll on Twitter or X or Facebook or Instagram, if you poll people there, the poll is not going to be reflective of average voters. It just isn't. But because Kamala Harris and her team in 2020 looked at Twitter at the time as the sole arbiter of what the American people feel, they took some crazy lefty policies. And because they took some crazy lefty policies, coupled with her being a weirdo at her cackle, they got out before Iowa. And what I think the Tim Walz pick out of Minnesota shows for Vice President of the United States, what I think it shows is that they haven't yet learned their lesson. Which I know is crazy, but I don't think Kamala or her team, that's assuming any of her team is still there from back when she ran for president in 2020, but Kamala Harris and her inner circle have not learned the lesson of the internet is not real life. And because of that, they ended up picking Democrats as a whole, but Kamala in general. The Democrat ticket is now the most liberal senator that was in the Senate before she was the vice president, and the most liberal governor, which is a crazy way to run things. I was talking to several friends over the weekend, and we have liberal friends. We live in California. That's just how it goes. And just talking about policy, if we are just strictly talking about policy and nothing else, Donald Trump is the moderate. I understand, polarizing guy. He said some very silly things, I think, over the weekend in Georgia. He's in Atlanta, and he was talking about just bashing on Brian Kemp, who's a super popular governor of a state that he has to win. But anyways, outside of the personality. If you just look at the policies, Donald Trump is as moderate as they get when it comes to the current political scope. And instead of counteracting that with your own moderate, Kamala Harris picks the leftiest of the left. It is stupid. It is dumb from a race running standpoint, and I, as well as many other conservatives / Republicans, am elated that is what happened, because holy cow, she could not have picked a worse pick. I think, especially if the goal is to continue to tact towards the middle, which again is what you have to do if you are the running for president. I'm trying to pull up this clip right now. You know what? This is gonna get a little bit wonky because I put it in the wrong slot, and because I put it in the wrong slot, we're having a little difficult time pulling it up. Let me see if I can play this. All right. There we go. Let me see if this works. If it does, this is an entirely big transition, but I don't know. There's not much more that needs to be said of Kamala's stupid pick other than celebration. Thank God they didn't pick Josh Shapiro. But I want to play this clip. If this clip works, if it doesn't, maybe we'll... People have been emailing me questions, which is fun. So I think we're going to do that at the end of these now. But entire transition to this video from the UK. I want you to watch this video. And then I think I have a take on it that not enough people are talking about. And really, maybe not even anybody is talking about. It's the fact that they don't have freedom of speech, but it's also the fact that they don't have guns in the UK. It is the fact that they do not have the First Amendment and also do not have the Second Amendment. Let me see if this clip works, and we'll discuss on the other side. Watch this.
Okay, so...
What do you mean I can't have any alcohol?
Okay, well, I'll tell you. Okay, the time's 20 to 3, 14:40. I'm arresting you on suspicion of improper use of the Electronic Communications Network. Under
What?
127 of the Communications Act, okay? So you do not have to say anything that may harm your defence if you don't mention one question, something which later on in court. Anything you do say may be given evidence. Do you understand that?
So I'm actually being
You're
arrested?
going to be arrested, okay?
Right.
So you got to the police station.
Right.
Ask you, okay, this is in relation to some comments that you've made on a Facebook page. Okay?
Oh, really? Oh, it's a Facebook crime, is it?
Okay.
Right.
So we need to ask you some questions about that.
Right.
Have you got anything in your pockets,
I've got my keys. I got... No, that's about it, I think. Keys.
So, anyone who's been arrested, we can search them under Section 32 of the Basic Murderers Act.
Right.
And that's for dangerous items.
Hey, I mean, you said I was going to be arrested under some what information? I'm going to be arrested for posting on Facebook.
Made some comments that are offensive, obscene, and people have made a complaint about that, and it's
And can you tell me what this comment was?
Okay, well, we'll do that when we interview.
All right. And so, what am I going to be locked up for the night, or?
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not.
Right. Do I need to
Unless
take
you
my
film
medications
us.
with me?
Yes, we will look at taking all of those.
When do you need to take them?
Well, I've got pain medications. I've got sleeping medication. I've got anxiety medications, which I might take one of those in a bit.
Okay.
You know.
Well, if we take everything with us, then you've got everything there, haven't you?
And then we've got a nurse up there. They'll be able to.
Okay.
They'll be able to come and see you, and then once you've been there, they can assess whether or not medication can be issued. All right. So what we're going to do is, if you want to pop yourself up, we're just going
All right.
You
search.
need the glasses
Search you.
to come with you.
My glasses.
Yeah. Do you want to take them with you?
Oh, look at it. Oh, look at this. That's probably his wife. Holy cow, that's great. I love that. If you haven't been paying attention to what has been going on in the UK, but all throughout Europe with their crazy idea to let in a ton of people, probably to prop up their social systems, but also to make the liberals feel good about themselves. The UK and so many other European countries are getting overrun by, I don't even necessarily think they're illegal immigrants, just immigrants in general, which I'm not anti-immigration, but at the same time, I do believe, as the kid of an immigrant, if you're going to immigrate to a place, you have to figure out why you're wanting to do that. And the reason is, well, because you're looking for a better life, you're looking for opportunities. And if the place that you're moving to has those better opportunities and it has that better life that you're looking for, you're going to want to assimilate to where it is that you're moving to. But that hasn't happened in the UK or anywhere around Europe because of tolerance. They are so tolerant that they are changing the entire culture and how they live and how they do life and how they communicate with one another, what they believe as a country. Talk about the UK specifically, the entirety of the United Kingdom is changing in a way that is not going to be good for them ultimately. And so that leads to stuff like this. This guy posted a comment on Facebook. I love what he said there. Oh, that Facebook crime. Yeah, they don't have the First Amendment in the UK. And if you say something that the government doesn't like, and I understand that people will be like, well, it's not what the government... No, it is. It is what the government doesn't like. If you say something that the government does not like, you will be arrested in your home. That is the first problem. Now, the second problem that I think is super important and people need to talk about more is the fact that they're able to enforce not having the First Amendment. I realize that was convoluted and weird. But the fact that police officers willingly went into the person's home to arrest them for, like he said, a Facebook crime is a bigger problem that we can't have happen here in the United States. I realize, I don't know, maybe this is not the most popular opinion about this, but I think this is a good way to show how important the Second Amendment also is when it comes to the willingness of law enforcement to enforce the laws on the book. Let me explain that. Because the United States has the Second Amendment, the authorities obviously have the military, and we're not talking about that. But local law enforcement is a difficult job. I know cops. I love cops. They too will tell me it is a difficult job. But because the Second Amendment exists, there are limits to what law enforcement will do. For example, in New Zealand, in Australia, in the UK during COVID, law enforcement was able to walk into places and arrest people for crimes that were crazy. Now, I'm not obviously, not pro people fighting the cops. But if you look at it from a law enforcement side of things, and I've had law enforcement friends tell me this exactly, the severity of the law and the law that was broken need to justify putting the officer's safety at risk. In other words, if a person has committed a crime so egregious against the law and against society as a whole, the officer, thank goodness, is willing to risk personal safety in order to make sure that person is off the streets. And they are. They're risking their own personal safety by going into what could be hostile environment and arresting that person. Now, if you take away a person's right to defend themselves, or a person's right to have a tool that defends himself, if you take away the law enforcement officers, I don't even want to say fear. I'm trying to thread a needle here to not make everybody all upset, but I do think this is actually important. If there is no fear for their own safety, people in positions of power will do things beyond the point of necessity. In other words, in the UK, there is no fear at the local officer level that you're going to encounter a super hostile environment. And because there's no fear of that super hostile environment, because they don't have the Second Amendment, officers are willing to personally go in and arrest people for Facebook crimes. Here in the United States, you can only enforce the laws that law enforcement is willing to enforce, right? You can have laws on the books that say you can't do this, but if that law is too stupid in the eyes of the local law enforcement, and that law won't actually make a difference, and that law doesn't actually indicate a dangerous person, it's going to be a tough sell to get officers in the United States to actually go enforce that law. And politicians and lawmakers know this, so in most cases, they at least try to not put laws on the books that are going to receive so much pushback from the local law enforcement that they don't ever get enforced. All of that is to say that in the UK, they do not have those same trepidations, we'll call it, as law enforcement officers. And because they don't have really any fear that anything bad will happen to them, they are willing to exercise power. I'm not anti-cop, this is not anything like that. What I'm saying is that if there is no limits to the negative outcomes, well, let me rephrase that. If there are never any negative outcomes for arresting people, and there's no risk to having to enforce that law, the law in and of itself has no bounds. They can make up laws and just enforce them willy-nilly because there's never any fear that enforcing those ridiculous, stupid, crazy laws might cause any harm to the people tasked with enforcing it. I probably should have thought that out more and put it in a more cohesive way, because I think what I'm trying to do is I'm not at all advocating for any sort of violent interactions with law enforcement enforcing stupid laws, because there are stupid laws on the book. But what I'm trying to say is that if the laws get too frivolous, I guess, if they get too stupid and ridiculous, a law officer in the United States of America will not risk his or her safety to enforce that law. And I think that is a strong and necessary barrier that exists in the United States and nowhere else, especially in countries in Europe. But I'll have to read some of the comments and see how that played off. I don't know if I explained that super well. Maybe I'll ponder that more myself. But anyways, I appreciate you sticking around, tuning in. I know this is kind of a weird iteration of how we're doing things nowadays, but I appreciate it. This is fun. We got air conditioning in the studio, which honestly I honest to God think that is part of the reason why. It's not the big reason, but it's part of the reason why we stopped doing the show in February. Took a 6-month hiatus, but now there's air conditioning, so it's not that big of an issue. To be in here in the heat in the summer. But I appreciate you sticking around, tuning in. We'll see you probably tomorrow. Like I said, we have air conditioning, so things are going good. See you next time. God bless America.